So, everybody, welcome to the COCPA's CME series. We have for you today Matthew Agaz and Judy Thomas is going to be moderating. Judy, can you take it away? Thank you.
Absolutely. So today's CME series is rooted in purpose, finding success, but staying grounded. And our speaker is Matthew Agaz, and he is the senior manager of audit at CoBank. And Matthew joined CoBank in 2016 after 3 years at E&Y. I guess it's just technically EY, doing integrated audits and financial statement audits in their assurance practice. Now, Matthew didn't take the same route as some of us did. He got his bachelor's in accounting and his master's in accountancy from New Mexico State University. He is a Colorado CPA and a member of the AICPA, the Colorado Society, and the Institute of Internal Auditors. And I thought it was interesting in his bio, he says, outside of work, Matthew serves on the Colorado Society's Ed Foundation Board of Trustees. And I kind of was expecting him to say, oh, these are the activities I do for fun. And Matthew, if that's what you do for fun, we need to have a chat. Now, Matthew's family has spent generations in the New Mexico agricultural industry, and they've been longtime borrowers with the Farm Credit System. And I think Matthew's going to tell us a little bit about that. And congratulations to Matthew and his wife, Katrina. They just celebrated their 1-year anniversary in October. So, yay. They say that the first year is the hardest, but I will tell you that there are little stretches like 5-year and stuff like that, where there might be a time when you want to kill each other. I'm just kidding, Matthew and Katrina. They enjoy camping and exploring the outdoors with their dog, Wrigley, and maybe Matthew will tell us what kind of dog Wrigley is. And then his other hobby is that he enjoys attempting to not be really bad at golf. And Matthew, I can tell you that that is one of my hobbies too. I always get up on the first tee, and sometimes I think, well, you're supposed to keep your eye on the wall and where it goes. And I have to have spotters because I have no idea where my ball goes, unless, of course, it's like 2 inches from the tee, in which case I'm really able to find the ball pretty easily. I just hope I don't embarrass myself. So hopefully you play golf better than that. So with that, take it away, Matthew.
All right, thank you, Judy. First, just want to thank everyone for attending today and joining me. I know this is a busy time of year, but I just want to say I appreciate everyone's attendance. And for those listening to the recording, I hope you find it enjoyable after the fact. And thank you for listening. Yeah, Judy, I've heard year 1 and year 7 are the hardest for marriage. So we've got about 6 years to keep refining the craft of marriage, I guess, and hopefully we could survive the next 6 years. Looks like my wife is in agreement. We've got it under control. So just want to say also thank you to my wife for joining the webinar today. In terms of golf, Judy, we will have to go out and play a couple rounds, I think. It depends. One day I might hit it really far, and the next day it might be 2 inches in front of me or lost in the woods somewhere. So I echo your sentiments. And also, Wrigley is an Australian Shepherd. He's of merle color, and he's got blue eyes. So really pretty dog, but a really big pain in the butt right now. He's about 9 months old, so he is a handful. Before the call, he was chewing on my wife's headphones, so that was great to have to deal with that right before, but we've got it under control. So we'll see the aftermath when we get out of here. With that being said, again, I appreciate being able to be a part of this wonderful series. I think the people that have come before me are incredible speakers. They have incredible stories, and to be considered worthy of being a part of this series means a lot to me. I'm really grateful for that. Fun fact about the previous speaker, Diego Baca, he was actually my manager at EY. So he has been a big mentor in my life. And Diego actually was the best man in my wedding. So we have some pretty close ties, and ironically, neither one of us knew that we were both doing this series. I didn't know till I was like, well, who does it before me? I should probably listen to theirs. And I'm like, you gotta be kidding me. I gotta follow this guy up. So he did a tremendous job, set the bar really high. But again, really, really grateful to be a part of all of this. So with that, I'm gonna share some slides, and this is not a accounting presentation. We're not going to be technical in any degree. The design of the slides, I did not spend a lot of time perfecting my slides either. Kind of just slap some pictures in there to mainly be used as talking points and help guide our conversation. And so I will go ahead and share my screen. Let's see. Oops. Got to share the right side. All right. Can everyone see my screen okay? Perfect. All right. So as I was kind of sitting back and listening to the other CME series speakers, I said, well, what am I going to talk about? I'm definitely not the most interesting person, much less to talk about myself for an hour. I'm not a big person likes to talk about myself. I'm more of a listener. I like to learn about other people, learn what they do, what they're interested in. So this is a kind of good twist for me to spend some time talking about myself. But as I reflected, I said, well, what about me makes me unique? And I think there's a couple of things. Is I grew up in agriculture. I am a minority CPA in the state of Colorado, which, as we know, there's not a ton of minorities in the profession. It's growing, but especially in Colorado, that continues to grow. So I said, well, it's a unique perspective. Maybe I can talk about that a little bit. And then I also said, I also want to be relatable. And I think something that I'm trying to weave into this conversation is that we can all relate to being at points in our lives where maybe we've taken a step back and said, what am I doing? Where am I headed? Am I headed in the right direction in my career, in my personal life? And just want to kind of talk about those things and how I've embraced some of those challenges and how I've embraced some of that diversity in my life, where maybe I wasn't always the most prepared to handle some of those things. So I just want to spend the next 50 minutes or so talking about that. Judy's definitely going to chime in. Seems like she's got some jokes lined up, which I'm nervous for. Hopefully she's not funnier than I am. Bar's low, Judy, but give me a little bit of slack. Just kidding. Make all the jokes you want. And then if anyone has any thoughts, questions, feel free to bring them up in the chat. I want this to be interactive. Don't want you guys to just have to listen to me for a straight hour. So with that, talk a little bit about where I'm from, where I grew up. If you guys remember those maps from when you're in school, it kind of said, well, in this part of the state, they produce oil. In this part of the state, they may produce wheat or things like that, those interactive maps. I tried to create one for my little part of the world. You can see there's a big Chile. I grew up in Hatch, which is the chili capital of the world. And we'll get a little bit more into Chile and some controversial takes on Chile a little bit later on. But I grew up in a small town outside of Hatch, New Mexico, which is even smaller, called Garfield. Garfield was an incredibly small place, stop signs only. Nearest neighbor, was half a mile maybe, and so it was one of those towns, everyone's real spread out. There wasn't a lot of kids growing up. If I wanted to hang out with friends, I had to go ride my bike about 15 minutes to a friend's house. And so it was a very small town, very rooted in agriculture. I grew up with two sisters. And also, farming. Farming was the lifeline to that entire valley. The valley is called the Hatch Valley. It's great for growing crops, gets good amount of rain most of the time, but is also just a good place to grow up. It's one of those places where you see in the movies, it's Friday night football, and then on the weekends, you're at church on Sundays, and then you're going to dinner or lunch with your grandparents after that. And so that's how I grew up. Very small town, very slow pace of life. Kids would drive tractors to high school because they'd be working all night, and then they had to go to class, right? And so that's just the kind of town we grew up in. We also had a very big migrant community, meaning a lot of the kids, they'd be there in the winter, and then when summer or the harvest seasons came around, they were gone. Or vice versa, they were going somewhere in the winter to continue to find work. And so it was an interesting way to go to school. You would have friends that you all of a sudden the next day they're not there, and you don't see them for a couple months, and then they come back. It's like, where were you? It's like, oh, we were in California. We were working in the fields out there. So very, very different way to grow up. My family has farmed for multi-generations. We grow chili, pecans, onions, alfalfa. We kind of have a diverse slate of crops. And I'm really, really glad to have grown up in that way. In high school, I played sports in a small town. Everyone's a 3-sport athlete, I like to say. And that's what I focused on. I probably didn't care that much about school growing up in high school. My graduating class was 100 people. And to this day, I'm pretty sure it's still the largest class we've ever had from what I've heard. But I was not even in the top 10 of my graduating class, in the class of 100. And half of those students were probably migrant, part of migrant worker families. So some of them weren't even there for the full year. So I probably didn't focus on my education as I should have. But coming out of high school, my dad had this mentality of anyone can be a farmer, but a farmer can't be anyone else, which I, to this day, still incredibly disagree with, because a farmer is a chemist, he's a biologist, he's an engineer, he's an accountant. He runs the business from start to finish. And, growing up, I'm like, I'm not going to argue with my dad. I'm not going to go against that, because that's the household we grew up in. And so decided I was going to go to school. My dad said, you're going to go to school. The beautiful thing is, in the state of New Mexico, we have this thing called the lottery scholarship, meaning if you're a resident of the state and you go to an in-state school, your tuition got paid for. So pretty much everyone was going to go to college. It was a way to at least get people in the door and try and raise the education level in our state. So I decided to go to New Mexico State University, which is right down in Las Cruces, New Mexico, about 45 minutes from El Paso, about an hour and a half from the Mexico border. So again, interesting place to grow up. But that's what I decided to do with my post-high school career. So a little bit about me, but want to talk about a little bit more about how I grew up. And the people you see on this screen are people that are incredibly important to me. In the left-hand corner, you have my godson and my nephew. His name is Easton. He's about 8 years old now, so he's bigger than the chili plants you see in the picture for sure. But really lucky to have that little guy in my life. He's given me and my wife some big laughs, but he's someone that teaches me things, teaches me how to be kind, and teaches me how to be inquisitive, and wanted to make sure I included some pictures of him as well. But really, these pictures in the right hand side of the slide, that's my family. Those are my parents, my sisters, and then the bottom right are my grandparents, my father's parents. They have been incredible influences on my life. to this day, I look back and I think, wonder what grandpa and grandma would think about what I'm doing now. And incredibly humbled to have made it this far, coming from a minority agriculture community. My grandpa actually did people's taxes on the side of farming. He was also the county clerk. Very interesting background, but I would say maybe that's where I got my desire to be an accountant from, is his lineage and what he did in his spare time. But again, just want to take time to reflect on growing up in the Hatch Valley. It's Chili's a big thing for us down there. It brings people together. It brings family together. You can see, surrounded by family in these pictures. And so, we'd always take time every harvest to get together, put our chili up for the season together, and then help my father with his harvest, to harvest all of the field. And so it was a great experience to be a part of. But also, another thing I want to touch on is New Mexico chili is better than Colorado chili. For those who unfortunately have only ever had Pueblo chili in their life, I really hope that you get the opportunity to experience greatness that is Hatch chili. It just tastes better. It looks better, tastes better, all of those things. So I wanted to make sure I took some time to clarify and settle that debate. I know some people may feel passionately about it, but I want to make sure that we set the record straight here of where it's really at with chili. So and then for those unfamiliar with the way chili works in general, is there's green chili and there's red chili. Green chili comes from the same plant as red chili. Red chili just means it's more mature. It's gone further into the maturation process. And so really that's the only differentiator. Some people that I've met have said, well, where does the red chili come from? And so wanted to clarify, they're both the same plant, both the same type of chili. They just mature a little bit longer. So with that being settled on the chili front, I wanted to just talk about something that's important to me and something that I had instilled in me very early in my life, was being impeccable with your word. And you'll see that these kind of slide themes, they come from the book, The Four Agreements. And I don't know if anyone's had the opportunity to read that. It's an incredible book. I try and revisit it every so often because I think those four agreements are so foundational to who we are as people and to creating a caring, loving society, that it's a book that I talk to everyone about. I remember when I read it, I showed it to my wife. I'm like, you should read this book. It's great. When my niece was in college at DU, I told her, you should read this. It'd be great. You're in college. You have a lot to learn. So I'm trying to bring in some of those four agreement themes from my perspective, how I interpret them. So to kind of get into those themes, that way you guys don't think like I'm just rambling about random things. That's kind of where I'm headed now. I want to touch on these four agreements. And so with that first agreement, being impeccable with your word, growing up in a small town, it was important to a lot of people had was their word. I didn't come from a very rich community. Everyone had enough, but it wasn't easy to get there. And so who you were as a person was worth more than a lot of the tangible assets that people have. And that was something my parents always taught us. And it's something I've tried to apply in my career, in my personal life. When I'm talking with someone, I try and be impeccable with words. I try and shoot people straight. I try and let people know that if I'm talking to you about something, it's because I'm sincere about it, that I'm doing it with a good reason, that I want to see a good outcome for yourself and me, and try and bring positivity into a conversation. Words spoken cannot be taken back. I think in the era of social media, it's easy to throw a sentence out there and let it go off into the world and see what happens. But we don't always think about what the impact of those words are. And so I think whether it's your personal life or your career, it's a good thing to always think about is, what am I putting out there with my words? What atmosphere am I creating with my conversations? And am I creating a positive atmosphere? I think it's incredibly important with the societies that we live in. It seems like opposite opinions are stronger, and we're further apart from meeting in the middle than we ever have been. And that's why I wanted to touch on that. Is it's important to think about your words, how impeccable you are with them. Also, another shout out to my wife. She's taught me a ton about being compassionate. Being a type A auditor, probably that wasn't in my wheelhouse coming out of college and things like that. But I've learned a lot and continue to try to be true to my word. And my parents, they always taught us to respect people and watch what you say. It was one of those households where you might catch the other end of a broom or whatever was closest. You may have to run a little bit, but that was just how we grew up 30 years ago, as a kid. And it was just a different environment. And so they always taught us of, don't worry about other people, run your own race. And that's something that I'm learning now of, don't worry about what's going on with anyone else, run your own race. And so, wanted to touch on that really fast, of just kind of being impeccable with your word, why that is important. And it's easy to forget it. It's easy to think, oh, I'm just going to say what's on my mind and see what happens. There are consequences. And I think if we keep that in mind in our career and our personal lives, makes the world a better place. So that was kind of me going into college era, right? I mean, we talked about me growing up. We talked about me in high school. Didn't really care a whole lot about school. Was focused on sports in my small little town. And then I went to college. And when I got to college, I had no idea what I wanted to do. I started off in education. Then I went to kinesiology. Spent some time looking at criminal law. Thought I wanted to be a lawyer. My wife says I'd be a great lawyer. So maybe I have a career change in my sight. But then my dad said, take business classes. At least just go learn about business. And so I said, all right, I'm going to go do the general business career path, and then I'll figure it out. Well, one of those classes that I took was Intro to Accounting. And I think, like most people who take Intro to Accounting, you either really hated it or you really liked it. And I ended up being one of those people that really liked it. It was just something that made sense in my head. A debit and credit, that made sense. They should equal each other. And I really enjoyed it. So my professor at Intro Accounting suggested I take another class. And so I took another class. And then I kept taking classes. I'm like, you know what? I think I'm going to be an accountant. I knew nothing of accounting. I had a math teacher in high school who was a retired CPA, and he was pretty curmudgeon-y. He wasn't the most inviting person that I had ever encountered. So my first interaction with an accountant was not great. Then the only other interaction I had was my parents. My dad's one of those, and whoever is in the tax accounting world, tax preparing world, I feel sorry that you have to interact with people like my dad, who files his taxes on the very last day possible. And my dad was always one of those where he'd come into the house from the farm and tell my mom, hey, we've got to go sign the taxes. And she'd be like, you waited till the last second again. And it was the same thing every year. So again, I apologize for those who have to deal with people like my dad in the tax world. But those were the only interactions I had with CPAs. I would go in the office with my dad when he'd go sign the taxes as a little kid, but I had no idea what they were doing. And so at that point, I started to progress down the accounting path. But with that, I struggled a ton. I struggled with anxiety. I struggled with lack of self-confidence. Probably looking back on it, it probably was a form of like depression, but a lot of things were going on in my life, and I remember, things like failing tests and calling my sister who had graduated college a little bit before me and being like, I don't want to do this anymore. And they would always tell me, just keep going. You've started the semester, why stop now? And I'd get into those moments and I'd finish it. And that, to me, that kind of first goes back to being impeccable with your word, right? I've committed to these classes. I've taken these professors' time, their resources. I'm taking a seat in this class when I could have been given to someone else, and if all I was going to do was quit. So I kept moving on. And I had to learn a lot about myself as a person during my time in college. And these individuals you see in these pictures here are my best friends from college. Picture in your left is our last Beta Alpha Psi meeting. It was the end of the year meeting. It was our last one as Masters of Accounting students. And this picture on the right is from my wedding day. And we're still friends. I've been out of college for about 8 years, but these people taught me a ton about the header on this slide, which is not taking anything personally. I think when you're in that spot of lacking self-confidence, when you're in that spot of self-doubt, and someone does something to you, it's easy to perceive it as an attack on you. But just like the 4 Agreement says right in the book, is they're operating in their own world. They're looking at life through their own lens. They really probably don't even care what they do to you. They are worried about what are they doing for themselves. And that's something that once I started grasping that concept, helped me tremendously. It's something I have to remind myself of still to this day. But I think if we think about that and apply it in our lives, whether we're dealing with someone at our jobs or dealing with someone in our personal lives, realizing that no one is doing things, most people, there are people who act intentionally to hurt people, but most people don't. Most people make decisions based on what's going on in their own world. That's something to always remember, is no one's out to get you. And I think it's just one of those things that as I progressed from college into the business world, I had that chip on my shoulder. I had those moments where I'm like, why does this person not like me? Why are they doing this to me? But really, it had nothing to do with me. It had to do with that person. And those are the things that I tried to learn as I was in college. And I learned the hard way. Went through a lot of ups and downs in college. And through that process, I got my bachelor's, decided to stay at New Mexico State, got my master's in accounting. We had a bridge program, so I was able to do it in half the time because I stayed there. So that was a big decision in me staying. But by the end of my time in college, I received the Outstanding Accounting Student Award for the College of Business. I graduated with a 4.0, and I got a job at Big Four. And so when I think of who I was in high school and who I became in college, it was huge. I grew a lot, but I still had a ton more room to grow. But I really do think without these people we see on the screen, these things don't happen. We called ourselves the Core Four because there was 4 of us. We all went to work at different Big Fours, believe it or not. So we had them all covered. But without my Core Four through college, right, I think where I end up looks tremendously different, and maybe not here. So graduating college, as Judy mentioned, I went on to work at EY, ENY, Ernst & Young, all of these things. But I want to start off with a quote, and my wife will love me for this quote. I think it's a Selena quote. I don't know if anyone's seen the movie Selena or knows who Selena is. She was a famous Latin entertainer. She was before her time. I think she was the Beyonce before there was a Beyonce, in my opinion. But in that movie, her dad's talking to her, and he says, we've got to be twice as perfect as anybody else. We have to be more Mexican than the Mexicans and more American than the Americans at the same time. And it's exhausting. And that quote's always stood out to me. Me and my sisters reflect on it all the time of how that rings so true to us. Being born in America, being Hispanic, it's different. You know, I can go to Mexico, and I have, but you get looked at a little different. They're like, this guy doesn't speak Spanish, he doesn't know the culture. But then when you're in America, your skin's a little more brown. You know, you kind of, people say kind of have an accent, and it's difficult. It's difficult to navigate both of those different cultures, and try and somehow fit in both. And so that quote always stood out to me. It's something very important to me of how hard it is. And I don't think it's just Mexicans. I think it's a lot of different minorities face this problem of how do I stay true to my origins, my roots, and how do I assimilate into the societies that I'm in now. And going to EY was a big eye-opening moment for me. I moved to Denver, and day one of staff one training, everyone's standing up and saying what college they went to. I'm in the room with people from Notre Dame, University of Arizona, BYU, the list goes on. And I'm like, these are really good accounting schools. Like, they gotta be really smart. I'm from New Mexico State. Gotta be a mistake. You know, these guys must have just been meeting, you know, to be blunt, right? Meeting the quota, right? They're probably like, oh, we need diversity. Let's bring in Matthew. You know, that's what goes through your head when you don't have that self-confidence. And NMSU, New Mexico State, is 58% Hispanic student population. So suddenly I went from a place where I'm the majority to Denver, where I was the minority. And especially in a Big Four public accounting firm, I was certainly the minority. And I'm sitting there and I'm like, oh man, maybe this is a mistake. You know, maybe I shouldn't have done this. And I spent some time, you know, got through the training, but at the end of the training, Diego, which I mentioned earlier, he was teaching the training. And he talks about College Map. And College Map is a great program that EY still does, but it was a mentoring program for at-risk youth in high school that wanted to go to college, wanted help doing that. You know, I mean, these kids didn't even know they had to fill out a FAFSA, like the things that sometimes, depending on where you grew up, you just take for granted. These kids didn't even know all the steps they had to take because they're trying to be first generation. And I was like, that program sounds cool. So I went to one of the events, and this is one of the pictures from one of the first College Map events I ever went to. And that to me was life-changing for my career. I suddenly developed a passion for this program. And eventually I became one of the co-directors of the program before I left EY. But it just became so vital to me. I remember I used to love talking about it to other people. It was something that was near and dear to my heart. And suddenly EY felt comfortable. Suddenly it was more than just the technical accounting aspect. It was more than ticking and tying work papers or completing the tie out on the 10K as a staff. It was, I've got another purpose here too. And I think that's really great. And we're, you know, this whole presentation is talking about purpose. This is one of those areas where I found a purpose. Now I'm fortunate enough to help CoBank with their diversity and inclusion efforts. Our associate resource groups, I spend a lot of time participating with them, helping that get off the ground in the farm credit system, which is also not an incredibly diverse atmosphere as well. Farmers are generally not minorities. Usually they don't own the farms. And so it's just from a different perspective now. But that was one of those key pivotal moments. Another key pivotal moment for me was meeting Ken Boyer, who is really huge in the diversity and inclusiveness community. I met him at New Mexico State. He came down to recruit for EY, which makes sense, right? Minority, we're a minority school. His whole job is to try and create inclusiveness at EY. And he came down to visit us, and it was great. When I saw him at this EY conference as a staff one, he remembered who I was. This guy meets thousands of students every year. And somehow in his mind, he had filed away who I was as a person. And he asked about the farm. He asked, how are the chilies? What? How do you even remember having those conversations with me? And to tie in the title of this slide is don't make assumptions. Don't assume anything about anyone at any point in your life. I would have assumed Ken meets thousands of people, doesn't, meets people, probably creates a great impression, and then he's on to the next school or on to the next big meeting. But this guy showed me that you can make it to the top and be totally genuine. You can be a genuine human being. And that was huge for me. It helped shape who I am now, how I act with people that I meet in my career and in my personal life is, I don't remember everyone. My memory's not that great, but I try and create a genuine relationship with the people I do meet. I try and create a bond with them. And if I had just made assumptions, the same way that I could have made assumptions about my peers that were from Notre Dame, U of A, BYU, couldn't relate to me. They didn't know how I grew up. They came from way different backgrounds. Their parents were probably CPAs, or they knew things about business, and I came from a farming background. These guys, I can't relate. Totally false. And that was something I had to learn the hard way at EY. I spent a lot of time with a chip on my shoulder trying to convince people that I belonged there when these people probably never doubted that I belonged there. But from my point of view, I had to let them know that I belong here. And so again, making assumptions, it's a waste of energy. You don't know this person. Don't assume negative influences. Don't assume that these people don't care about you. Generally, people do. And again, remember what we're putting out in the world: positive energy, positive conversations, all of those things. Think about what we're doing, and creating assumptions doesn't help. And so I just wanted to, again, touch on this third agreement here of never assuming. Create clear conversations, be clear in your communications, and people will be clear with you back. Create kindness in your conversations. And that will go a very long way. So as we kind of near the end of this slide here, at this point, I'm 3 years into EY, and suddenly I miss home. Suddenly, I'm remembering where my roots are, and I'm thinking, is it time to move back? I've only spent 3 years in Denver. Holy cow, what am I going to do? Where do I do without my family? And my wife, at the time, was also living in Denver. She had just moved up. So we had each other, but we both missed our family. We both missed home. We missed the slow pace of life. Was I really ready to leave EY? Was I really ready to leave Denver? And made a tough decision, and decided to leave EY. But then I found CoBank, and I'm incredibly thankful for finding CoBank. It let me combine my roots in agriculture to, feels odd to say, right? But a passion in accounting and auditing. Accounting and auditing is something that I'm good at. It's the foundation that I built my career around. And that was awesome to be able to combine those two things. And I suddenly became rejuvenated and excited about where I was headed in my career, that maybe I don't have to move home just yet. Maybe I can help with agriculture through a different lens in a way that I never thought. Maybe I don't need to go home, live on the farm to do that. So again, we're talking about staying rooted in purpose. I think through our careers, we have those moments of, what am I doing? Why am I here? Am I in the right place? And it's okay to feel those things. Take a step back and breathe and say, where do I really want to be? And it's okay if where you want to be isn't where you're at. You can get there. Sometimes it just takes a decision. Sometimes it takes sacrificing something, but stay true to who you are. And if you do, you'll be happier for it. And I think that's really what the book, The 4 Agreements, tries to teach, is how to be happy with yourself. And that was a big point for me in starting to shake off where I thought I needed to be versus where I wanted to be. So this is not a 4 agreement at all, but wanted to touch on it. Patience. I think sometimes in our career, in the culture of now, we want everything yesterday. We need everything now. We want to be at that next level now. We want the bigger house now. We want to continue to grow so fast that we may not always have patience. And these two pictures, to me, sum up patience. The first one, any baseball fans out there, the Cubs won a World Series after a 106-year drought. And I'm a huge Cubs fan. Coming home from school on WGN, the Cubs were always on in the afternoon. They only really played day games. They didn't play a ton of night games because Wrigley Field didn't have the infrastructure to really do night games. So I'd always watch them. My dad was a huge Yankees fan. And I was like, nah, the Cubs are way better. Little did I know, in the first 20 years of my life, the Yankees would win a ton of World Series and the Cubs would not win it. But when they finally won one, I was like, holy cow. Like, imagine being one of those people that's been alive the whole time and never seen a World Series. They're 90 years old. They've been a Cubs fan their entire life. But then they see them win the World Series. The incredible amount of patience that takes to continue to stay devoted to something that is that poor performance-wise. The next picture is a picture of me and my wife on our wedding day. And she has patience because she has to put up with me. And I'm a pain in the you-know-what most of the time. But both of these pictures to me represent patience. And it took patience to continue to build our relationship to get to a point of marriage. But it takes patience in your career. It takes patience in everything to get to where you want to go. Growing up in agriculture, it was the same cycle every year, but every year was entirely different. But it started the same way. You put a seed in the ground and you gave it water, you gave it nutrients, you cared for it, you waited for it to germinate, pop out of the ground. And then for the next 6 months, you were hoping it didn't hail. You're hoping the wind didn't blow the plants out of the ground. You're hoping animals didn't eat it. You had to do all of these different things and have a ton of luck to get a output, to get a crop, and something you could make money off of. But that takes an incredible amount of patience because there's so much outside of your control. And I think we forget that a lot, is what we can control in life is very small. We can control very few variables in our lives a lot of times. And without that patience, without saying, okay, I've done what I can, and now I have to see how this all shakes out. I have to see how this all works. We tend to lose that. We tend to not want to see how our career can play out at an organization because down the road, someone else is offering us more money, and we get into this habit of constantly moving from job to job, or constantly seeking out the bigger house or the better experiences, things like that. And it's okay to enjoy the day, enjoy the ride, enjoy the process, live in the moment. And if all you're doing is focused on the future, how can you really enjoy the present? One of my mentors in college, when I said, what advice do you have going to work? He said, be the best staff you can be. And if that's making copies and ticking and tying work papers, do it perfectly. Because before you know it, they're going to see that and they're going to promote you. And I've tried to keep that in mind of being the best that I can be and where I'm at. Yes, I want the promotions. Yes, I want more opportunities. But if I'm incapable of doing my job really, really well and showing those above me that I can continue to do it, what reason do they have to give me another opportunity? And so wanted to just, touch on patience. Again, not one of those 4 agreements, but it is something that I have found incredibly helpful to learn over time. I'm not the most patient person. Those that know me well can probably attest to that. The last and final agreement is always do your best. And remember, your best varies from time to time. It's, one day you may only have 40% to give. You may not be able to give 100% because of other circumstances. But if you're able to give all that you have, it will make a difference. And you will always be able to walk away saying, I gave it my best. And if you can do that, you can rest your head at night, in my opinion. Don't shortchange yourself on any day, because every day you can only give your whole effort once. You can't make up for yesterday through tomorrow. I think John Wooden has a similar quote to that, and it is true. And I put this picture of me and my wife climbing a 14er because to me, that represents life. Sometimes you're at the base of the mountain, right? And you're looking up, you're like, let's attack this. We're going to climb up. It's going to be great. It's going to be the most perfect day ever. And you're full of energy. And then some days you're like halfway up, halfway through a task, halfway through your day at work. And you're like, why am I here? What am I doing? Who said this was a good idea? And then some days you're freaking out on the mountain. There was a point on this climb where these hikers gave us a shortcut. We're like, great, less steps means I'm down earlier, means I get to drink a beer sooner. And so we took the shortcut, and before we know it, we realized it was a really bad shortcut. We were basically hiking on ledges on the face of the side of the mountain. You had to walk sideways, and my wife is freaking out. She's like, you're gonna fall off. And I'm like, thanks for now making me feel like I am incapable of climbing this mountain, and maybe I will fall off, and it's a long way down. But sometimes you feel like that in your life. Sometimes you're like, what am I doing? This is going to be a disaster. I should stop and turn around. What's it worth? Why am I doing this? But remember, always do your best. We ultimately reached the top, as you can tell from this picture, despite the sausage fingers that our hands were swollen, and my wife was crying and making me feel like I was going to fall to my death. We made it to the top. And when we did, it was great. And something to realize is whether it took us 4 hours or it took us 10, we reached the top, we reached the summit. And I think that is true for your careers, for your personal life. Everyone has their own summits. Everyone has their own 14ers, and what is appealing to you, what the summits you're trying to reach may not interest anyone else, but it's your summit. It's your purpose. It's what you want. And that's the life you should live. Be true to who you are. Be true to your purpose. you're going to have detours. You might try and take a shortcut like we did on that 14er, and it turns out it was a bad idea. But do your best every day. Stay on your path. Stay on your purpose, and stay rooted in that. To close is being true to yourself. Put your roots in your purpose so far in the ground that when it's gusty up top and the winds are swaying you back and forth and people are questioning your purpose, or you don't feel like that's where you need to be, when those roots are so deep in the ground, it won't affect you because you're so rooted in your purpose. You're so rooted in who you are and who you are at your foundation. And that's what I just want to leave people with is everyone's journey is going to look different. You may go to public accounting, you may not, you may work in industry your entire life, whatever it is, as long as it's what makes you happy, and find that thing that makes you happy. Find the multitude of things that make you happy in your personal life, in your career, and give your best at all of those things. And I think we'll find happiness. I'm still trying to work on it. I'm still trying to find more happiness. There's always room for improvement in my life, but I'm really happy with where I'm at as a husband, as a brother, as a friend, as a coworker. And I really just want to hope everyone finds that. And again, just want to say thank you guys for taking the time to listen to me talk for 55 minutes. Thanks for hanging in there with me. But if Judy, I don't know if we have any questions or you have things you want to talk about, but I will hand it over to you.
All right. So Matthew, I have to first of all to say that you are a very inspirational speaker and an inspirational CPA and accountant. I found all the things that you talked about so deeply moving about what you believe and what you do. Do you believe that you will go back to New Mexico, to home, and find something in accounting that moves you there?
That is a question that my wife and I probably discuss at least weekly now, right? Is do we want to move back? I think we're at a point where we're hopefully fortunate enough to start creating a little family of our own. And I think, as you guys saw in those slides, family is the most important thing to me. And because of that, we have those conversations a lot. CoBank has been kind enough to kind of start talking with me about it. They know where my heart and my roots are. And, we've had discussions about maybe I don't have to leave this great organization that I'm at. I would love to stay at CoBank, and I think it's an incredible place to be. And so if I can get the best of both worlds, certainly, I think we're definitely open to it. I think that's the one thing out of COVID, right? We figured out you don't have to actually be in the building to get your job done. You want to be there to create the relationships, but you can do both. You can do it both ways. So something that we talk about. My dad's getting older. He's 72, and he keeps trucking, keeps running the farm. But I take a lot of vacation to go work on the farm, and it's something I love. It's a nice break from the office, but it is one of those things where it gets harder every year to not be there with my family.
Have to be careful about throwing those numbers around. Getting older, he's 72.
For a
Some of us
farmer,
are headed down,
72
down
is
that
still
pathway.
really young, but he's getting a little too old to be lifting 40-pound sacks on his own. Is my point.
So I threw out there in the chat that we can have a green chili cook-off anytime. Although I do have to say I have gotten some Hatch's chili, had it imported over. Because I do enjoy Hatch's chili as well. But yeah, we have some pretty good chili here in Colorado, green chili.
I'm always open to a cook-off. Time and place, Judy.
All right. So I found the mix of crops that you farm interesting. I know I'm supposed to be talking about accounting, but the chili, pecans, alfalfa, and I've forgotten the other one that you have an interesting dispersion of crops. So
Yeah, that's a great thing that you kind of noticed is in New Mexico, you have to be so diversified. We're not like the Midwest where you can grow thousands of acres of soybeans and wheat, and that's what people do. In New Mexico, there's water constraints. We rely on the great state of Colorado to funnel water down to us, but we're also the intermediary between Colorado and Texas. And Texas is a pretty big state and they like a lot of water. And so you're faced with these challenges of you have to grow different crops that have different needs because we just don't have the environment to sustain one sole crop across our entire valley. So chili grows really well. It likes the heat, likes 100-degree days. Onions do really well in New Mexico, but my family in March every year, the last couple of years, I go down and I help plant pecan trees. We've planted over 2,000 pecan trees in the last 2 years, which is about 1,000 trees per year, which means I dig a lot of holes with a machine, not by hand. But it's a lot of work. But pecan trees require even more water than chili and onions. But the thing is that they grow so well. And in states like Georgia, when they have the hurricanes like they've just had, it really impacts their crop production for pecans. And countries like India and China are huge consumers of pecans. So the market's there. So you react to the market similar to any other business, and we'll figure it out. I'm betting on someone to create some great technology to help us get by with less water, because that's where we're headed in the Southwest. A lot of people and not a lot of water.
absolutely. I did want to point out that Alicia said it's inspiring how you are honoring your roots and also bringing that into the community you are in right now. And then Mary says, what a gift you've given us, Matthew, in sharing your story and your guiding principles. Thank you. And I would agree with both of those. I noticed that you did not include a picture of Wrigley, and now I know where that name came from.
Yes.
In talking about your love of the Cubs. So that's a good thing. I'm still waiting for the Rockies to do something besides act as a farm team for all the other MLB teams. But I did find it interesting. That was a great comment about how farmers are chemists and accountants, etc. Because if you think about it, it is so true. And that you picked up on that and shared that with us. It gives us a whole new respect for farmers and people who work in the farming industry. So I thought that was great. Does anybody else have any comments or questions that they'd like to share with Matthew? Oh, and Mary, I didn't mean to imply that being an Ed Foundation trustee was not fun. We get to do one of the best things in the world, which is give away money. So I agree with you, but I was hoping, when he said that he did other things as well.
I totally understand, Judy.
So others, share thoughts with Matthew, questions, comments.
Alicia's just posted a question in the chat.
Oh, Alicia asked, curious your thoughts on ways that the agriculture metro areas are different or the same and how we can support one another, especially as CPAs.
That's a great question, Alicia. I mean, I think they're similar in a lot of ways, aside from, being a rural area and then kind of being in a metro area, besides the actual structure of the environment. But there's a lot of hardworking people, whether you grew up in a metro area or or a rural area. Ton of incredibly smart, hardworking people, and it's something I probably didn't appreciate coming out of college, because our goal was get a Big Four job. How can I land at the Big Four? That's what our faculty pushed for. And at a small university, I mean, we got 20,000 kids at our school, but we live in southern New Mexico. There's no Big Four around us. And so for them to be able to place us at Big Four was an incredible feat on their end. But I never understood the kids that didn't want to leave, that wanted to just stay in the area. And now that I've progressed through my career, I understand it a lot more. I'm like, oh wow, wonder how they're doing. I wonder what their experiences have been like. And I think it's branding the CPA profession as it's not a one size fit all. Yes, Big Four is what you see in the news and the Wall Street Journal and the headlines, but there are so many other opportunities. There are so many other career paths out there. And that's, I think, the beauty of like the See Me series is you're getting to see people that have a wide array of experiences in their lives. And they're all CPAs, but they've all taken different paths. I think it's talking about the flexibility of a CPA. It doesn't just mean Big Four. It doesn't just mean you prepare taxes. There's a million different opportunities. And I think that's the important thing to stress about our profession. It's flexible, it's dynamic, and it's recognized as a really valuable certification and profession amongst all people in the business world.
It kind of leads to another question that I have, and because you were talking about in your high school, how you had a lot of migrant students or students who were migrant workers. How is there a role for the profession to help these students finish their, I don't want to say finish because I'm assuming at some point they finish, maybe they don't, but work through their high school and encourage them to, I don't know, follow the profession? Does that opportunity exist?
I really think it does. I think a lot of the students that were in the migrant kind of worker program and things like that, I think 3 of them ended up going to accounting at New Mexico State with me, and we followed each other through all our years of school. And that's been really cool to see them get their CPAs and advance in the profession as well. But as a whole, right, a lot of those students, they're forced to help put food on the table. They need as many different streams of income as they can in those families, especially now. I mean, the cost of living in America is high. The cost of living anywhere right now is going up. And people need their kids to, why do you want to go to school? You can make money right now. That's the mentality that was prevalent in our community. Because a little bit of money looks like a lot of money when you're 18. And you don't really understand how over time cash flows work and just how income changes over the course of your life and needs and all that. And I think it's how we communicate that. Again, accounting can cross different languages, right? At the end of the day, debits or credits, they work the same no matter what language you speak, but helping people understand how vital it is and what it means to be financially literate and how we push that out into these high school communities. I think that's where it starts. Is like me, I didn't even know what a CPA really was coming out of high school. And I think that's most kids. It's not something that's you get a ton of exposure to, and it's how do we go to that level? How do we start talking with those people early, often, letting them understand, because you see lawyers, you see doctors, those are the things that you know exist. But accounting is a great career. Again, like you said, very diverse opportunities. So how do we brand that to the high school kids is a question I think we have to continue to ask ourselves as a profession.
Well, I think it's certainly something that we've talked about in the Accounting Education Committee. So something for us to further dive into. So it's what, 1:06, and I'll open it up one more time to anybody who has any comments or questions. And if not, then I'm going to turn it back to Stacy. No, not
It's
Stacy.
okay, Judy. I have a question for Katrina.
All right.
And Katrina, if you're willing. What do you think has
Absolutely.
been the most important aspect of Matthew's work as a CPA?
Let's see. I'm trying to think. Honestly, he's made, like, he says that I've helped him, in so many ways, but he's really helped me grow. And I'm in a complete opposite occupation. I'm a speech language pathologist, but it's really helped me kind of, excuse my dog, and there's Wrigley, guys.
Yay!
Yeah. Okay. It's really just kind of helped me get in that mindset of being grounded. And that's something that I think that Matthew has shown me, in our whole relationship, just really being true to myself and finding myself and kind of implementing it into everything that I do in life, regardless if it's just life or it's my career. So in a way, he's helped me along the way, just establish that and being rooted in where I am and my purpose.
It's such a lovely reminder that while people on the outside, I think, probably look at accounting and CPAs as number crunchers and people who are always trying to find problems and point out things that aren't going well, that in fact, you are incredibly important in the relationship side of things, right? And that groundedness really does make a difference when you're working with people. That's the whole reason you exist, is the relationship. Thanks so much for
Yes.
participating today. It's really great that you were able to join too, as well as to share Wrigley with the rest of us.
I'm sorry I had to keep my video off and my sound off because he's going crazy back here. So, but yeah, it was really cool and just really fun, getting to see Matthew share his story, and I could hear it over and over again, but it was really nice that he got to share it with all of you. So I'm proud of you, Matthew.
Yeah, that's probably why Wrigley was going crazy too.
Yes.
He could hear it.
Yeah. He's like, I hear Dad, but I can't go see him right now. So yeah, I think he's ready to play with him now.
Well, for those of us who are left, I hope that you will join us next month. Next month is November. And again, Matthew, thank you so much for sharing your story with us. It was so inspirational, and I truly, truly enjoyed it, as I know many others did as well.
Yes,
Thank you so much for the opportunity. Thank you everyone for listening. I really appreciate it. It means a lot.
See you at the chili cook-off.
All right.
Aha.
All right.
Thank you, Matthew. Thank you,
Thanks.
Judy. Thank you, everybody, for joining.